So I get out and I'm like full on like decompression sickness at this time. Get the emergency diving first aid manual out, and I'm looking up decompression sickness, and vomiting isn't on one of the symptoms. So I'm like, I'm okay. In the morning, I'm not very well.
So you're saying you're okay because you were vomiting?
I was thinking, well, I haven't got decompression sickness because I'm vomiting, and that's not on the list.
Right.
So I obviously haven't got it.
Yeah.
So long story short, everyone's been drinking, no one can drive. And rather than just phoning an ambulance, one of my friends has got like a really old like mini metro car, which goes at like top speed, like 40 miles an hour. So she's like, oh, she'll take you. So we're like, we phoned the decompression centre and said, I was like, I think I'm not very well. And I had phoned one of those, like there's an emergency helpline thing just for scuba divers. But the guy thought I was in Turkey, not Torquay.
Okay.
So there was a bit of a confusion there. So I didn't get much help from him. And so anyway, we're driving down the motorway at like 40 miles an hour. And the decompression centre are like, oh look, there's a big football match on, so hurry up, because if you're fine and it's not, then we'll just like knock off and go home, which is fair enough. So we get there, this girl Tracy and me in the mini metro, and they're waiting outside for us, and then they just look at me and they're like, oh my god, this is like really, really serious. So straight in the chamber, and they were phoning my mum and dad, apparently. That was when my mum and dad had mobile phones and they never switched them on. They were like, well, we'll switch them on if we need them. And so I spent 4 full days in a decompression chamber, like 14-hour days. Yeah. Wow. I was really lucky. They were like, so this is where, you push yourself. I was going to be going to a conference in Edinburgh on the Thursday, and every day I said, I'm going to Edinburgh on Thursday, and they'd be like, yeah, you are. And I was like, I'm going to Edinburgh on Thursday. Even on the Thursday, I was like, I'm going to Edinburgh on Thursday. And they said that it was my determination that I was going to go to Edinburgh on the Thursday, even on like the Friday, that actually got me through. They were like, how you survived that is literally a miracle. And any like medical journal would say that you should have been dead from that, because I just left it so long.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Be The Push podcast. My name is Jack Ferguson, and I'm going to be sharing with you stories of how business owners and entrepreneurs had to push through the hard times in their careers. We're going to be discussing the lessons learned from these experiences while arming you with actionable advice so you can be the push when you need it most. Show notes can be found at bethepush.com/podcast and clicking on the relevant episode link. Let's get started. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the podcast. Today's guest is Rachel Smith of cyclingrachelsmith.com. On today's episode, we cover a range of topics, including Rachel's near-death experience while scuba diving in the UK. It's a fascinating story, that one. Rachel also introduced me to a concept of manifesting your own redundancy. She talked to me about a whole year of non-buying, what that's done for personal finances, and why we should all take our personal finances a little more seriously. I'm not going to ramble on too much in the pre-show here. Let's get on with the episode. Here's Rachel. Hello, so today we're here with Rachel Smith, a transport planner, author of Underspent, the Break the Habit of Impulse Shopping in 7 Steps, and part of the Australia and New Zealand Smart Cities Task Force. Rachel, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks. So our first question is, what is the Smart Cities Task Force? I've never heard of this before.
So it's an international organisation. There are task forces around the world. The task force that I'm on is for the built environment. So how we make the built environment, so anything going up, more kind of smart for the future. So kind of like the digital, kind of digital buildings, automated vehicles, anything to do with buildings and technology. So things like smart light poles, smart buildings, smart infrastructure.
Right. Okay. So what type of problems do we have in Australia and New Zealand in that area? You're talking to someone who knows nothing about this stuff. So what are some of our challenges that you guys are tackling?
So we've got the Smart Cities Australia Week in late October, November, and I guess the focus for that is really educating people working in maybe the public sector, in businesses, academics, or obviously they understand, but really making people aware of our digital future, understanding what's being done elsewhere, best practice, and really raising awareness about what smart cities will be like in the future.
Right, and how are we doing?
In Australia, I think most people would say we're a little bit behind other places.
Okay.
So one example, not in the task force that I'm in, but in the UK, obviously there are electric car charging points at all service stations. You're going down the motorway, you drop into a service station, to get a cup of tea and, get fuel, and you can charge up your electric car there. Lots of supermarkets have got electric car charging locations. It's not really clear where all of that kind of infrastructure is in, say, Brisbane or across Australia. So we are kind of lagging a little bit behind.
Right.
So, but, we've got some great smart minds here.
Yep.
We've got some great academics. We've got lots of good research going on. So lots of people interested in technology. So that all could change very quickly. But really raising awareness so that these things are built into kind of policy and guidelines now.
Righto. And I'm going to be a little bit doomsday for a second, but let's say I'd be interested in your opinion. And let's say if we don't do anything for 10 to 15 years, we just let it go as is. We don't embrace these smart cities and start to change in that way. What do you think would happen if we just kind of rest on our laurels?
So I'm not speaking for the Smart Cities Council here.
Sure.
Just my own personal opinions.
Yep.
I suspect that lots of big businesses, smart companies like your luxury car companies and things will come along and do it anyway. So it's all about making sure that people, say, working in town planning, transport planning, building design in councils and governments are aware of what's happening around them and what might happen in the future.
Right, got it. Very interesting. Okay, so let's take a step back in time though and start to get to know you a little bit more. Where did your career start?
So my career started a long time ago. So I did a geography degree, and I graduated when there weren't many jobs, and you would get the Guardian newspaper when it was still, most people read it in newspaper format on a Wednesday, because that's when all the environmental jobs were advertised, and about 10,000 people would go for every job, and you never even heard anything back. So everyone said, geography, that's great, but you're never going to get a job in that because you're really good at drawing maps and colouring in and understanding volcanoes and glaciers. But what do you do for a job? So I did a teaching, what is called in the UK, a postgraduate certificate in education. Lots of people do those because it's another year. Another year that you can spend studying and delaying getting a job. So I did that, and I did some other work. I worked for SmithKline Beecham in one of their factories. And so I had that job, but my first real job was then I saw a job advertised, which was about access to further education. So kind of marrying up transport, which I'd done in my geography, and education that I'd done in my education postgraduate certificate. And I'd specialised in adult literacy. And it was about how people could access TAFE, and how more bus services and things could go to TAFE. So that was like a 6-month research project. I got that job because they had heaps of people that they interviewed all day. I was the last interviewee. I took a little handout of 10 reasons why I should get the job.
Really?
And I did my interview, and then I gave them all a piece of paper, and about half an hour later they phoned and they said I'd got the job because I had got my 10 reasons why.
Right, like on a little brochure or something,
Yeah,
was it?
yeah. I'd like pitch like you should, because you kind of, when it's like a job like that or any interview and you're a little bit nervous, you think, well, I might not tell them the things I want to tell them, so why don't I leave them a little cheat sheet after?
Yep.
So it worked.
Help them yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you, what gave you that idea? Did you just...
I was desperate.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was working at SmithKline Beecham in one of their factories in the labs. So I'd go around and do water sampling of all the big machines and any water going through any bits of equipment just to test that there was no E. coli.
Okay.
But that's quite interesting for a few weeks, but then it gets a little bit like, if I have to do this every day of my life, that's probably not going to be so interesting.
Right.
But actually, that was the location or a job, the only job that I've had where I've seen real leadership.
Wow.
So the guy owned, a little Irish guy, who's about 5'0", and he owned the factory and had only made things for SmithKline Beecham. And he used to walk the factory floor every morning, every afternoon, and every evening. So he knew every single person who worked there, and he would have had hundreds of staff. He knew any problem as it occurred. He was there. He'd ask people, what are you doing? What can we do to make this better? So the kind of lean principles, without people really knowing that he was doing lean on the go kind of thing. And he was saying, what could we do to make this better? What can we do to make this, more efficient? He went round to people and said, what do you think of the working hours? And it was down in the southwest near a really big international surfing beach. Lots of surfers work there. And lots of people said, actually, I want to go to Bali in the winter and work here in the summer. And so he did annualized hours and brought in all of these things, which now I look back and think that was actually really revolutionary. And he was a real leader.
Wow. So you're sort of saying at the time you don't really think you recognised it for what it was? Or
people were just like, wow, he walks around and, oh yeah, he comes and chats to us. But then when you get older and wiser, you think, wow, how many CEOs do you know who go and speak to, every person every day?
Yeah, it's incredible even just hearing the story.
Yeah.
And so and he'd do that every day?
Every day. And sometimes he would say, because they had like a loudspeaker, he'd be like going to London for the day, for a meeting or wherever, and he'd say, I'm only going to walk the factory on a Monday or in the morning, and then I'll be back really late, so you people on the afternoon shift won't see me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And people didn't think of this, like sometimes with a boss, it's sort of like they're looking over your shoulder a little bit. Like, if someone was checking in 2-3 times a day, you might hear that and think, oh, well, are they, what's their intentions? But you sound like you're describing it in a way that he wanted the best for everyone.
Yeah. And because he was always there, it wasn't like, oh, the management are here.
Yeah, okay.
Because it was like all the time, and that was just what he did. It was every day. It was normal. It wasn't like, when I worked in engineering consultancies, you'd see the management coming down and people are like, oh, there are going to be redundancies. They're walking the floors. Where because he walked the floors all the time, and they had like a canteen, and he would sit with people, or there was kind of like a leadership table. So they weren't sitting, chatting to you all the time, but you could go and sit with them, or they would come and sit with the kind of workforce. And now I look back and think, wow, that was really quite incredible. If I knew then what I know now, you would almost have asked him more questions.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so you mentioned real leadership there. So if you were to sort of boil that down and define what you thought, in hindsight now, real leadership is, how would you define it?
Listening, being interested in everything, understanding, not making assumptions. So, it might be that, trucks would arrive and we hadn't finished or, you would test like toothpaste. It would have to go into incubators for 3 days. And, the truck would be there. And, how do we then, okay, so we've got an issue now with why don't we phone the truck company and get them when they're like half an hour away to phone us so that we can sign off documentation so there's no wasting time. So that was pure lean. But he kind of worked through why things didn't all kind of like, why weren't the ducks lined up?
Yep.
Really kind of understood rather than, sitting on high and saying, or, in a different location and saying, oh, someone's clearly done that wrong, or,
right.
And really just understanding and unpacking the real issues.
Wow.
And working through with people who are doing the job every day on how to solve problems.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to work for this guy.
Yeah. He's already retired now. Yeah. Or I know he's retired now.
Right.
He might even be dead. But yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So you grew up in you're in the UK, I presume.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens after this job?
So then I go to a council. I work in a strategic transport planning role for 6 months because it was all temporary contracts. It's almost gone full cycle. When I started work, everything was temporary contracts, and now, like, obviously with the gig economy and freelancing, it's all temporary contracts again. So 6 months doing that, and then 6 months in road safety, and then I went to an engineering consultancy.
Okay, cool. And so why get into this transport planning type of work? What sort of attracted you to this type of work?
So I'd done urban and rural transport planning as part of my geography degree, and thought, oh, that sounds really boring. And then when I did the research project, I went out and interviewed loads of people. I spoke to students. I talked to kind of what we would in the UK called remote communities, but not like being in like Emerald or somewhere where you really are remote from, or not that Emerald's really remote, but you know what I mean, places that are a long way from the next town.
Middle of Queensland, sort of outback Western Australia.
But these places weren't, but they in UK terms, there was no bus, so if you didn't have a car, you couldn't get somewhere. And I went and spoke to people and said, why would, you might have people who can't read and write and they want to go to an adult literacy program, but they just can't get there, or they can't afford to get there. And really talked about what the problems were, why, and what was the problem, what was the reason or the problem behind the problem. And then I really realised that what I really liked was solving what I call real problems of real people in real places.
Okay.
So, what's, Mary, who's got 3 kids and wants to do a nursing degree, who lives in Whoop and, can't drive, how can she access education? And, now we're really lucky. I mean, obviously in Australia, you've got the School of the Air. But, now with like online learning and things, it is much easier. Mm-hmm. But still, you want to go and speak to your tutor or, be taught in a classroom situation so that you're connected with other people.
Got it. And it sounds like you've mentioned lean principles a few times, and almost what you're describing at the moment sounds like you were employing those sort of lean principles. When did you have sort of a concept of what lean principles were at the time, or did you just did it?
I've never done a lean course. I'd like to do one, but you can pick up bits from, basically just like streamlining and making everything more efficient. Yeah.
But also just talking to people, you're talking about talking to real people, not just looking at spreadsheets and that type of thing. So it sounds like you had a pretty good grasp on that early on and the importance of doing that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's like the key to anything or everything, is just go out and talk to people and ask them.
Right.
Because whatever you think, quite often your target market or your audience or whoever you want to help, they probably have a really good idea of the solution, or more of an idea of the solution than you might have.
Yeah. Yeah, just ask. Cool. Okay, so, this is the podcast where we typically talk about the tough times one's had in their career. If someone sort of to ask you, to describe or talk about the tough times you've had, what would be the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, one of them was I came to Australia in 2007 to Brisbane, and I didn't know anyone.
Okay.
So that's quite hard.
Yeah.
I got a job here because the guy who I used to work with in the UK, we sat next to each other in a consultancy, and he got offered a job here. He was a kite surfer and really wanted to come to Australia to go kite surfing. And then when they were sorting out his visa, he was like, And so he said, when the recruiter who's sorting out his visa phones, just say I'm not here. And so the guy would phone. I was like, Mark's not here. And after about the third call, the guy was like, he's not going to go, is he? And I was like, no, he's not going. So the guy was like, can I have your CV? And I was like, And I'd been to Brisbane. Well, I'd been through Brisbane when I was a backpacker. So I'd seen, the South Bank Beach, the Anzac Memorial, and a backpackers in West End. But that was pretty much it as far as Brisbane was concerned. So I put my CV in and got offered a job. It was kind of the end of 2006 when it was the big infrastructure boom. So they were desperate for anyone. And so my first boss here, he was like, just come for a year, it'll be fine. If you don't like it, you can go home. And so I've now been here for like 10 and a half years.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's good. But yeah, it is hard when you go somewhere where you don't know anyone. I turned up on Anzac Day night, and everything was closed on the Friday. It was before like loads of expats were coming here, so lots of businesses, they didn't have a really kind of slick HR process. So you just got dumped at an apartment in Spring Hill and not really told anything. And so I would like look on real estate talk, and I was too scared to use the internet at work. So I'd go to the library, and at the library you could only have 20 minutes at a time, and didn't have a computer or anything at home. So there were loads of things that I made it really hard, which now I would be like, no, I don't need to trot off to the library for 20 minutes and then go to the toilet and then go back and have another 20 minutes or And so everyone got put in Spring Hill, and you basically had to work it out for yourself. And, you'd look at, everyone had said, oh, Australia's really cheap for rent. And I remember going to this house to rent in West End. It was like a little unit as part of a house. And it was like $150 a week. And I said to the guy, but the windows are broken. And he was like, what do you expect for $150? And then I was like, okay, I need to up but I'd been told it's so cheap in Brisbane.
Right.
But it wasn't, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, we think, Australia and the UK are very similar, but they are in fact quite different.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in what ways are we so different?
Oh, just in like how banking and stuff works, and getting a rental property and only that open for inspection, and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, no one tells you that. You just have to work it out from other people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So you come to Australia, and what's your first sort of week to a month in Brisbane look like? Is this, you're kind of painting this picture for me where you're fumbling around the dark a little bit trying to work out what's going on. What was that like?
So I did write. I used to, because I was just like, I didn't know anyone. And the first 4 days, because I'm sure they're like, Anzac Day was like Thursday, and obviously didn't have to go to work Friday, Saturday and Sunday, so I didn't speak to anyone for 3 days. It was, so I used to write these emails back to my family and friends in the UK, and I was like, I'm going to write a book about this, but I should actually dig them out sometime. And it was like stinking hot. It was so humid. Had no car or anything. And I remember saying to one real estate agent, she was like doing one open for inspection at 10 and the next at 10:30, and I was like, can I get a lift with you? And she was like, no. And just I need to get the bus. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Yeah. And I was thinking, oh, just kind of give me a lift.
Yeah.
You're going like there as well.
Yeah.
She's like, no, it's against our rules.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And they're trying to rent out the place, so you think they'd help you out.
They could have like signed the deal in the car.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really hard. I mean, I didn't complain or anything. I just kept really quiet and just kept thinking, why have I come here? That damn Mark, if he had turned up,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been running around here in the heat, not knowing where to go. And I got the UBD. I just used the UBD.
Mm-hmm.
That was my best investment. And and now I look back and it was funny, but at the time you just don't know. There's just so much stuff you don't know.
Yeah.
Or it's what you don't know, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
And all the things you probably took for granted that
Yeah. And now I'd be like, oh yeah, why didn't you? Yeah.
Cool. All right, so I'm looking through your notes here as well, and I can see that you've written down that you had an incident as a scuba diver or scuba diving, which I'm sure the audience would love to hear about what happened. So could you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, so I'd been... it was a case of, when you're doing loads and loads of stuff and you're really busy and you've got everything, scheduled to the minute. And I'd been doing a big, kind of like a planning for real exercise, I guess, really, at a school for a whole week. There was a big school development, and I was doing some work for the council with all these kids, and like 1,000 kids, all helping to plan around their school and the roads and things. So I'd been working really long days. I'd done loads of photocopying because there was some more sessions the next week. And on the Friday, I'd kind of got home in the afternoon. And one of my friends was like, one of my friends is down for the weekend and he's a scuba diver and would love to go diving, but he doesn't know anyone. Would you go with him? So I was like, yeah, okay.
And where is this?
This is down in the southwest in a place called Torquay.
Oh, yeah, in Victoria.
No, in the UK, Torquay, yeah.
Okay, well, there's a place down south in
Australia
called Torquay as well. Okay.
So went diving with this guy on the Friday, and then I was like, my diving club, we're going diving on Saturday afternoon. You should come with us. So, and in the UK it's cold, so we wear dry suits, which are like a big shell suit, and you pump air through it, or you fill it up with air. So I'd done this dive, and this guy probably wasn't that familiar with diving in a dry suit. So we're down at 30 meters, and he has
30 meters down.
30
That's
meters deep,
right.
And he has a little panic attack, and grabs hold of me and inflates his dry suit, complete with whole Michelin man type size, and we just go to the top. But he was a really big guy, and grabbed hold of me, and it would just happen so quickly that you often in those kind of situations, by the time you realise what's happening, it's happening and you can't kind of get out of the situation. Yeah. So I get to the top, and I was like, our computers are going beep 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 beep, emergency, and get back on the boat. And I was like, we came up really fast. He was like, no, it was fine. And so I was like, no, that was computers alarming, everything. He was like, no, it was fine. So I said to the guy on the boat, and there were loads of organisations that ran, or companies that were running dive boats out of Torquay. It wasn't a boat that I would normally go on, but some of my friends were on that dive trip as well. And I said to them, can I use the oxygen? That would be the first, first aid measure, so to speak, is to go onto oxygen. And he said, the oxygen costs £40 to refill. And he doesn't reckon that you came up that fast. So no.
Oh dear.
So I'm saying to other people, he won't give me the oxygen. They're like, you're probably okay. Oh. So get back off the boat. I was going out that evening with loads of my friends, and so gone for fish and chips, and I was thinking, I don't know, I feel really tired, and then we went to see Spider-Man, And I think like most films, like say 2 hours, I don't remember any of that. I just sat there and all I felt was just, it was like bang, like really noisy, you know, like a really, really loud action film. It was just like, whoa. And so then I was like, I'm going home. Anyway, long story short, get up in the night. I'm like really sick. I'm not very well. So I get out and I'm like full on like decompression sickness at this time. Get the emergency diving first aid manual out, and I'm looking up decompression sickness, and vomiting isn't on one of the symptoms. So I'm like, I'm okay. In the morning, I'm not very well.
So you're saying you're okay because you were vomiting?
Oh, I was thinking, well, I haven't got decompression sickness because I'm vomiting, and that's not on the list.
Right.
So I obviously haven't got it.
Yeah.
So long story short, everyone's been drinking, no one can drive. And rather than just phoning an ambulance, one of my friends has got like a really old like mini metro car, which goes at like top speed, like 40 miles an hour. So she's like, oh, she'll take you. So we're like, we phoned the decompression centre and said, I said, I think I'm not very well. And I had phoned one of those, like there's an emergency helpline thing just for scuba divers. But the guy thought I was in Turkey, not Torquay.
Okay.
So there was a bit of a confusion there. So I didn't get much help from him. And so anyway, we're driving down the motorway at like 40 miles an hour. And the decompression centre are like, oh, look, there's a big football match on, so hurry up, because if you're fine and it's not, then we'll just like, knock off and go home, which is fair enough. So we get there, this girl Tracy and me in the mini metro, and they're waiting outside for us. And then they just look at me and they're like, oh my God, this is like really, really serious. So straight in the chamber, and they were phoning my mum and dad, apparently. That was when my mum and dad had mobile phones and they never switched them on. They were like, well, we'll switch them on if we need them. And so, so I spent 4 full days in a decompression chamber, like 14-hour days. Yeah, I was really lucky. They were like, so this is where, you push yourself. I was going to be going to a conference in Edinburgh on the Thursday, and every day I said, I'm going to Edinburgh on Thursday, and they'd be like, yeah, you are. And I was like, I'm going to Edinburgh on Thursday. Even on the Thursday, I was like, I'm going to Edinburgh on Thursday. And they said that it was my determination that I was going to go to Edinburgh on the Thursday, even on like the Friday, that actually got me through. They were like, how you survived that is literally a miracle. And any like medical journal would say that you should have been dead from that, because I just left it so long.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when they say they looked at you and they thought...
Because I couldn't really even stand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I got out of the mini metro. It's like...
Right.
I basically couldn't even walk. And so then like later that night, I couldn't walk, barely, like people holding my arms, and I couldn't walk in a straight line for a week.
Wow.
So they have in a decompression center, they've got like the chambers, and they have like lines, like all hospitals have like lines on the floor and stuff, and they'd say walk on the line. I couldn't even hardly get near the line.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
It wasn't just like if you're a little bit tipsy or something, you might go like a foot off. I was just like nowhere near.
Right.
I had like no balance whatsoever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you having any other physical symptoms at this point in time, or is it just no balance? And just to get an idea of what this is like to go through.
You're just being sick all the time.
Okay.
So they put this huge big mask on your head. And there's like this ring thing around your neck, and so because you can't breathe oxygen through a mask for those many hours, so you've just got this big mask, like an astronaut thing, helmet, and then air's going into that, or pure oxygen, or however what it is going in there all the time. They decompress you to like down to say like 30 meters, and then they bring you up really, really slowly over say like a 12 or 14 hour period, and you're in there with another person, but I had to have a different person every day because they can't do those long dives. Yeah, like the same person couldn't rock up the next day because it would wipe them out as well.
Right.
And then it's like, you would see in like the movies or on TV, they're like those tube things, so you slide in and the guy sat, like in a little tiny little space, and then they have like portholes, and they open them up and they put like little microwave meals in for him, and then they close that door, and then they'll speak to him through earpieces, and like a pilot has the headset.
Yeah.
So he's talking to them, and I couldn't hear what he was saying, or what they were saying. And then they'll say to him, "You can open up your side now," and then he would open up his little door, and his microwave meal would be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite incredible. Yeah.
So you they in this centre they have these really deep pools, do they?
No.
Okay.
So they just make it to what it would be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like
so
what it would be at 30
Gotcha.
meters. Yeah, it's just, and that's a great question to ask, because it's one of those things that you don't know what it's like until you actually experience it. So I assume that it was like a submarine. He went down in like a pool or something, but you don't.
Yeah.
And then they had like a really big chamber that had like a couple of beds and some chairs, like the size of this room, and then the little really tiny ones where they push you in the little hole, and then he sits at the end of the bed. But then all these old people were rocking up, and I was like thinking, like, dude's like 90, surely hasn't been scuba diving. But they also use it for people who are healing from wounds, like have wounds that don't heal, and they go in them as well. Obviously they don't go so deep, and they don't go in there for so long.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This room is about 3 meters by 5 meters, by the way, everyone listening, just so they have that context.
Yeah,
but
so it probably wasn't quite as big, but almost.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what about mentally? So you're doing this for 14 hours at a time. I'm assuming on that first day, when you getting sick, you're probably not functioning too well, and you're all over the place. Are you starting to come to a little bit and actually get bored, or what was that like?
So, and that's a really great question, because I always used to think, when you see people in hospital and they're just like staring into space and they look like, like their mind's blank, what are they thinking about? And it was just that if you're that ill, you actually don't think about anything.
Okay.
I just go, they'd pick me up in the morning, like the paramedics. There was a main hospital next to the decompression centre, like the main Plymouth hospital. The paramedics would come in the morning. They put me on a stretcher bed, wheel me down to the ambulance, drive me down to the decompression centre. They'd put me on another stretcher into the chamber, and then the same would happen in the evening. And I just wore like the hospital gown. I didn't have any stuff either. So until my mum and dad turned up, they were like, "What? Have you got any clothes?" And I was like, "No." And it's got the hospital gown.
Yeah.
But you don't actually care when you're really, really ill. You actually don't care about anything.
Right.
That's what I learned. Yeah.
Did the time go quick while you're under there? Like,
I would sleep a bit, and the guy had to do something with changing or taking the helmet off, say for like 20 minutes every hour, or maybe longer than that, a couple of hours. He'd have to do something and change stuff. So yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And so, and even towards the end of this time, is it still, are you still feeling the same? You're still as sick, or are you starting to, feel better by the end, and it's mentally different, or was it the same the whole time?
It was mostly the same the whole time.
Okay.
And then I went to my mum and dad, so they came and picked me up after about a week, and I stayed at theirs for a week and just stayed in bed and didn't do anything. Yeah, I was that wiped out.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're talking 2 weeks of your life is just see you later.
Yeah, literally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And after that, did you start, was it a slow recovery then, even after those 2 weeks, or were you pretty good after that?
There was probably like another week that I was kind of up and about and doing stuff, but not that much. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was really good. My mum had phoned my work and said, she's got decompressional sickness, she's in the chamber, and my work just said, just tell her she's on full pay until she's better. not to
Wow.
worry about anything.
Okay.
So that was really great, and
Yeah.
not many employers. Well, maybe they would. I don't know. But
Mm.
that was really, really great, because you can imagine people kind of thinking, "What am I going to do? How am I
Yeah.
going to pay my rent? How am I
Yep.
going to pay my bills?" Yeah. So that was great.
Right.
Yeah.
And were you, was this one of your first dives, or were you experienced diver?
Oh, I was an experienced diver.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you had to go back after. You couldn't dive. You got banned. They take all your cards and
banned.
stuff off you.
It wasn't your fault, though.
completely
This guy grabbed
banned.
onto you.
Yeah. From diving, obviously for health reasons.
Yeah.
And then you have to
Okay.
go back after 3 months and have a medical. And I was like, if I pass, I'm going to go and do my scuba diving instructor course, which is what I did. So I passed. And lots of people don't pass
Okay.
because they may have really damaged their inner ear,
Yep.
or various other respiratory problems or whatever. So lots of people don't ever pass
Okay.
because it is really quite serious. Yeah.
Yeah, and it didn't put you off diving.
No.
This, you just
No.
you're fine. Okay, right.
Yeah.
So I've dived twice, and I
Yeah.
remember I actually talked about this in the last podcast episode as well. And I remember that I was only down 5-6 meters, and my goggles started filling up with water. And I know the listeners have probably heard this story already, but I started freaking out then. But my instructor, he helped me and he calmed me down, and I got back to the surface eventually, because
and
the
you're
whole
still here.
but the
Yeah.
whole that was
Yeah.
5 or 6 meters down. I wasn't
Yeah.
allowed to go up quickly even at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And you're down 30 meters, and you've
Yeah.
gone up.
It's like 30 to the top. Yeah.
Wow.
In like a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's incredible, because I wanted to
Yeah.
just go straight up. I just
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
just get
yeah,
me
yeah.
up and
Yeah.
no.
Get me out here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, all right. Well, so let's go. Let's go back to Australia now for a minute. So you've started work. You've started work in Australia. You've been here a little while. What's you think of tough times? Is there anything else that comes to mind?
So I came here 2007 on a 457 visa. And then the middle of 2008, the global financial crisis hits.
Yes.
And so in December 2008, the consultancy I was working for, one Monday morning, there was just, lots of whispers, something's happening, and loads of people were made redundant, like hundreds of people. They just closed down whole departments. I remember the guy who sat across the partition, they were quite low partitions. I was at the end of the team that I was in, and there was a new kind of section starting from him down. And he sat at his desk and cried. This is a guy kind of like in his 50s. It was lots of people from his team got made redundant. Well, they didn't get made redundant. Their role got made redundant. And people just sat around kind of mesmerised. And, people got their cardboard box, their cab charge. It was quite harsh in those days. And those kind of things have changed now, where they shut down people's computers while they were being told. So, people had got, maybe family photos, or they'd got stuff, don't ever save stuff on your work computer. And, they came back to their desk and they're no longer in the system. And you just saw these people kind of leaving, and I was just thinking, crumbs. So in the UK, it's different. So they have to give everyone in an organisation a letter saying your role could potentially be made redundant, and people get like quite a couple of months warning.
Yep.
And it has to go to everyone. So that really was quite a really terrible experience to witness. It's almost worse. It's that kind of survivor syndrome.
Yep.
It was almost worse for people who were left in those following days. And so it really troubled me. And then I moved companies, not because of that. Another company contacted me, and they had other projects which were more aligned to what I wanted to do. And then the redundancy started again, and you just think, wow. And so I had been doing my Underspent stuff and my work with the Guggenheim, and all the time there were redundancies. And it was maybe lots of people have maybe got the attitude, whether it's denial or they're just super positive, whether, oh, I'm not bothered, it's okay, it's fine. Well, it kind of really played on my subconscious. And I was like, people need to be talking about this more. People need to be writing books about this on how to get ready. And someone came up to me and said, you need to stop talking about redundancy because you've not been made redundant, or your role hasn't been made redundant. And so it's really rude if you talk about it.
Okay.
So I manifested my own redundancy.
Right.
And in December 2015, my role was made redundant. And on the Monday and on the during that week, I'd had a couple of job offers. By the time I went in on the Friday to sign my redundancy papers, I'd already signed in the morning another contract for a new job. So I was really lucky. But whilst I was really lucky, and I appreciate that I'm really lucky, because for some people it takes them 3, 6, 12 months to find another job. I had also really worked hard for about 2 years, what I call getting ready for redundancy, not just professionally, but also kind of mentally and financially. Because what had really troubled me the most with all of the redundancies, it's that people were really angry and people had really blamed everyone else. So people would say, oh, I've just taken a car loan and now how am I going to pay it? Or I've just bought an investment property, how am I going to pay this? And it was like, but you can make good choices in life or you can make bad choices. And your employer never told you to go and buy that brand new Audi. And your employer never said, oh, we think you should go and buy an investment property. Everyone can watch the news and see, that the economy now is very up and down, it's very volatile, and that you should be prepared mentally and financially for the future. So when I had my redundancy interview, and it was really, even though I was really prepared, it was still really gut-wrenching, because you think, well, I had work and I'd worked hard, but I mean, it's never personal. But I did say, can I write a book about this? And they were like, no one's ever asked that.
Right.
So I was really upset. I'd got lots of nice friends there and I'd done some good work, but the only constant is change. And so, years ago people got a job and they expected to be there for like 40 years. And now, things could change for people tomorrow. So I've really been kind of advocating to people, from my experiences, to have money in the bank. I was like, if I had saved like 2 years worth of salary and I had it sitting in the bank, the HSBC phoned me a few times and said, why don't you do something with that money, and why don't you do this? And financial planners are like, why don't you do this and this? And I was like, no, because I want to know that if I don't have a job, that I can afford to live for 2 years. So
brilliant.
So while it was tough, it was a learning experience. It was about kind of being prepared, and it was about being kind of self-responsible rather than blaming others.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That opens up so many questions. I've got like 10 there. So let's get. But I tried to start a personal finance company about probably four years ago now, and it didn't go well. But I'll talk about that soon. And it'll be interesting, your views around personal finance and whatnot. But a lot of people just living week to week, or a lot of people, they're worried about this redundancy and whatnot. But are they, as you said, you prepared for it essentially? Is not a lot of people doing that?
I saw some research the other day that said if the interest rates went up and most households couldn't afford to find $23 a week extra for their mortgage.
Wow.
So, but answering that in another way, when I was doing my year of no buying, and we'll talk about that later, but a guy who I worked, he wasn't in the same team as me, but he kind of sat on the same floor and not that far away. He used to come up to me every Monday morning and have a, nag and a moan and a whinge about me not buying. Oh, shops are going to go bankrupt because you're not buying stuff, and it's people like you who bring the country down, and the economy is going to grind to a halt. And he used to go on and on and on. And then it must have been around like the November time. I was like, Andrew, what is wrong with me doing this? I wasn't a shopaholic. I wasn't spending like, $5,000 a day or something. I'm not going to send, Walmart broke from not buying for a year. What is your problem with me doing this? Because, it was, some people would have gone and almost reported him for bullying. I mean,
Okay.
it was clear that there were underlying issues.
Projecting a little bit, perhaps. Yeah.
And so I said to him, what is your problem? And he said, because me and my wife work full time, we've got 4 kids, and we couldn't, him and his wife both had really good jobs. He said, we couldn't put our hands on $50 cash, and it's really annoying me that you're probably saving money.
Wow. Okay. So he's annoyed that you're saving money.
So he was annoyed that I was saving money because they were both earning 6 figures and they had got nothing and like no savings. He said it's just either the mortgage or bills, and we're just like living literally hand to mouth, but on a affluent person's hand to mouth. So
Right.
and that's very, there's different hand to mouth. There's people on welfare or low incomes who literally are, once they've paid for food and accommodation, there's nothing left. And then there's people who've got so many stuff, everyone's entitled to their choices. I'm not telling people what to do, what they can do, what they can't do. But other people have got so many commitments and obligations that they're almost living hand to mouth as well. And it was really sad because Andrew, his role was made redundant before mine, about 6 months before. He really, really struggled to get a new role. And then he ended up having to go interstate and doing fly in, fly out. So now he's not, living with his family during the week. And so, it's really, really sad for him that he didn't, they literally hadn't got any money. So it was really life-changing for them, but not life-changing in a positive way.
Right. Okay. So you talked about your year before where you didn't buy anything.
Yeah.
Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
So in 2014, I didn't buy anything new or secondhand for a year and saved 38% of my salary.
Right.
So I saved $52,680.
Right. That's very
so
specific.
That's a huge amount of money.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for the reason of, why did you do it?
So I had been doing a project called the BMW Guggenheim Lab, which was a partnership between BMW and the Guggenheim, and it was all about cities of the future. So we had a mobile think tank, like a open laboratory, and we had this big mobile lab, literally, that we had in New York for 9 weeks. We had it in Berlin for 9 weeks, and then we went to Mumbai. And we had a different theme about life in the future every day. So in New York in 2011 and in Berlin in 2012, I guess I got really exposed to the sharing economy. So people hadn't been really talking about sharing in Australia then, and we didn't need to because we were in the middle of the mining boom. Everyone was making their squillions. This was going to go on forever. So there was absolutely no need for anyone in Queensland to borrow or share anything.
Yeah.
And so it was a really great experience. And so as an example, I was in Berlin. I lived in a little studio Airbnb, literally the size of this room. And the bed was like on a platform above. And it just had like 2 cups, 2 plates, 2 knives, 2 forks. And I was invited to a dinner party, and they said, you need to bring the apple crumble. Everyone got assigned a dish for like 20 or 30 people. And yeah, so I was like, right, And actually, I had to phone my mum because I wasn't actually sure how you did the crumble bit. And but I was like, what am I going to cook this in? And in Berlin, there's a real shame in buying things because it's anti-capitalist. And I was like, I'll be like, I'll be like in the village stocks if I go and buy a baking tray. And where'd you go and buy a baking tray in the middle of Berlin? So I thought, well, I'll go down to the cafe downstairs, and in a mixture of German and English, I said to the guy, would I be able to borrow a baking tray? And he said to me, just go out into the kitchen, borrow all the things that you need and bring them back when you're finished. Can you imagine going to somewhere in Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne and saying, oh yeah, look, I've got some family and friends coming around on Sunday, we're having a bit of a barbecue, we don't have all the things that we need, can we borrow yours? I mean, well, for a start, people wouldn't even do it.
Yeah.
So that made me think, wow, this sharing thing is pretty cool. So then we were going to Mumbai, and I was at Brisbane Airport. It was a Sunday, and I was waiting for my flight, and I was reading the Sunday newspaper, and there was an article in the magazine bit about a family in New Farm who'd only bought second-hand things. And I thought, well, that's kind of really admirable, but they had bought a lot of stuff. And I thought, well, if you're just buying because it's second-hand and buying loads of it, then maybe it defeats the object. But still really great thing to do, and good on them for raising people's awareness. So I went to Mumbai. We were really exposed to some of the slums that people would never normally get to go to. And you see people there who really value everything that they've got, whether it's a bottle top or, something that they're making or their clothes. And you just think, wow, we really don't value the things that we've got. So then from there, I went to the UK because it was Christmas. Makes me sound like a bit of a jet setter, but and it was like a couple of days before Christmas Eve, walking down Oxford Street with my mum and dad, and it was like, from Mumbai slums to Oxford Street is just like such a contrast. But people were buying like the world was ending, and everyone was kind of searching for that perfect gift for the person who's got everything. And the contrast was just like, it was like, whoa, this is almost a little bit too much. But I didn't really kind of think, oh, these people shouldn't buy things. And so then on New Year's Eve, all of my friends were like, oh, I'm going to do yoga in next year. And I'm going to, eat healthy food. And all of these New Year's resolutions, which were good New Year's resolutions in themselves. And just from nowhere, but guess deep in my subconscious, I was like, I'm not going to buy anything. And people were like, oh, have you thought this through? And I was like, no. and so that was going into 2013, and I failed. So I got as far as April, so 4 months. Don't go to Hastings Street in Noosa if you're on a no buying quest, because there's a lot of things to buy in Noosa.
Very tempting, is it?
And so...
But just a sec there, by not buying, what do you mean by that? Because you would have had to buy food and stuff.
So, I had rules. I made proper rules.
Yeah.
So I was allowed to buy food, essential toiletries, so like Tampax, toothpaste, and experiences. So I could still go horse riding, still go to the movies, still buy, flat white, but no physical stuff. Because if you say, and having now thought about, I hadn't thought those rules through either, but people go, oh no, buying, that means I have to sit in the dark and look at blank walls. So I still did the experiences, but no actual tangible items.
Right, that weren't absolutely essential, basically. Yeah. Okay, cool.
So basically food, Tampax, toothpaste, and then experiences. So then I really was angry with myself for the rest of 2013. I was like, I failed. And why did I fail? And all of those kind of things. And then I decided to do it again in 2014. 2013, I'd seen it as a negative, like it's the year of doom and gloom. It's like a punishment. I'm not allowed to buy anything where everyone else is. and I had really put a negative mindset on it. So in 2014, I saw it as a year of opportunity, as a positive, as a lifestyle experiment, and basically as a way to do things differently. And I succeeded.
Okay, awesome. So when you, obviously you've written a book about this now, so breaking the habit of impulse shopping. When you talk about sort of personal finance and this type of stuff to people, what do you notice as some of the problems that people tend to have? Because I remember when I was looking at this and trying to do budgets and whatnot for people, that seems to be the logical option, right? The first thing you jump to, do the spreadsheet. Hey, just plug your numbers into this spreadsheet, just spend according to your budget. Pretty simple. But what I found was that, you'd think it worked, it didn't. So what's your take on the problems around people have with, personal finance?
So everyone is an impulse shopper.
Okay.
So if you said to people, oh, you're a shopaholic, they go, oh, no, I'm not. A shopaholic's someone, who's like an alcoholic who gets up and the first thing they do is online shopping. And probably people aren't going to admit to that, even if they do. But everyone is an impulse shopper. And when I explain what an impulse shopper is, people go, oh, yeah, that's me. So an impulse shopper, you go to the servo to get fuel. You don't just come out of the servo with fuel. You've got chips and a magazine and chocolate and a fizzy drink and something to clean the car with and an air freshener and an impulse shopper is people who duck out for a sandwich at lunchtime and they come back with clothes, shoes, books, magazine, chocolate, snacks, coffee. So we're all just impulse shopping all of the time because marketing is really, really good. So we live in a consumeristic age and it's, I guess, really hard, unless you know how, is not to impulse shop. So, I see people at my work, they're like, oh, I'm just going to get a sandwich or get a coffee, and then they come back and they've got like 3 bags. Except they don't do that where I work anymore because everyone's too scared that I'll see them.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so impulse shopping is a big problem, and so when I remember when I was working through this with people as well, and it was interesting before when you mentioned about the high incomes, the 2 people that were together who couldn't find $50, essentially. Even with this is just my experience, but I did try and work with a lot of people, and even with the low income people, I did find savings. I did find ways that I thought they could save, but they wouldn't execute sort of what I said. So I'm just wondering, like, and you don't need to refer to that specific example about the person you work with, but can we all save? Yeah.
So there are 2 tips that I like for anyone and everyone, regardless of their personal situation or circumstances. And the first is to have a waiting list. So it's basically to delay the purchase. So I have a little list on my iPhone, and if I see something I think I want, I write it down, the date, or I type it in, the date, what it is, how much, and why I think I want it. And then I have it for 3 months. So I have a 3-month waiting list. And so great example, last October I thought I wanted a trampoline, one of those big ones you put in your garden.
Yeah.
Because I'd seen other people with them and I thought, oh yeah, I need a trampoline. And everyone needs a trampoline.
Yep.
So I write it in there, and they're like $300. So most people will probably just go, they think about it on Friday night, oh, we need a trampoline. So Saturday morning, they've gone and bought the trampoline. That's okay. And then they use it for like a week, and then they're like, probably didn't need a trampoline. So because then this is true of the trampoline, because if you look on Gumtree, there's like 1 million trampolines for sale. So I wrote down in October, trampoline, $299. The reason I wanted it was because it would be fun to jump on up and down. and then in January, because that's when I can look now to see if I want it, and I'm like, why on earth did I write trampoline on the list?
Right.
So I say to people, if you can't do 3 months, 3 months is, admittedly quite a long time, then make it 7 days or 14 days. 9 times out of 10, for me, I'm like, why on earth did I even write that down? And people who've done it, who do it now as a result of reading my blogs and whatever, are like, that works. Because I used to go out at lunchtime to get a sandwich or whatever, and I'd come back with like a dress and shoes. And now I wander around the shops and I type it into my phone, and then I'll give myself like a month or something, and they're like, I didn't really need it. It was just an instant thing.
Right.
So that's really good.
Because you're still saying that they can have it, right?
Yeah. You're not saying you can't ever have
Yeah.
it. Just delay it a little bit to see if you really want it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the other tip?
And the second one is, which is step 1 in the book, which is to identify what you love and what your priorities are. So in my year, I worked out that the things I love doing are like what I call experiences. So I like going horse riding, I like going to the beach. So then that kind of triggers in your mind, well, why would you go to Chermside or wherever shopping on a Saturday afternoon when you like going horse riding? So then you're putting your money into that. So people say, oh, do you just sit at home and look at a blank wall? And I'm like, no. Like, not going, like, horse riding is a non-negotiable for me. I go every Thursday night, and I have a bank account for horse riding. So every time I get paid, money goes in there. So there's always money for horse riding. So it's not about going without, it's just putting money into what you really love doing. And then the second is identifying what your priorities are, or the second part of that step. So for me, it was about having money in the event that my role was made redundant. Because I was like, I don't want to be one of those people who's really stressed and blaming other people, making bad choices. I want to be prepared myself. So for some people, it might be paying for their kids' school fees, going on holiday, putting money on their mortgage. It doesn't matter what your priority is. It's just that you know the things that you love and what your priorities are. And once you've done that work, then it's easy to go and do the budget.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I remember when I was doing this too, like one of the things that I would try and get people to do is have a reserve, an amount of money that sort of just sits there.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's you were talking about the banks and all that would call you up and say, oh, you should be putting your money here and putting your money here. I agree with you there, because then if you have that reserve sitting there that you're not going to touch, I considered that money that, I'm never going to touch it. I just have an amount of money that I'm just never going to touch. But that's just, that is the security you feel, and with having that there, knowing that it's, I call it year zero. So, your reserve might be 20 grand or 30 grand. That's year zero. That's not money you actually have.
Yeah.
So is that how you sort of think about it too?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I always say that budgets on their own don't work. So budgets are great. You need to have a budget.
Mm-hmm.
So I have this 11 bank accounts.
11.
So a little bit similar to a certain extent to the Barefoot Investor. So I'm not a financial planner. I say to people, I'm not a financial planner. I'm not giving financial advice.
Yeah.
But this is what works for me. So I grew up in the countryside. My gran, she lived on a farm, and my gran couldn't drive. So she was really restricted to, when she could go to the bank. And so she had one of those old kitchen cupboard things with all the drawers and the pull-down bits. And what were the spice racks? They were like these little plastic containers with red tops. That's where she kept all the money for the different bills. And because people in those days used to come and you'd pay them cash.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, I'm replicating my gran's jam jar system in the electronic banking world. So I have it so that there's no fees, because I don't have any cards, those accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just internet online banking accounts, but all in the same bank thing.
Yep.
So my money goes into my current account, and then I divvy it up into like bills, mortgage, food, car, fun things, horse riding, health, all of those. And then, people have different, whatever their accounts need to be. And then I transfer the money, and there's an amount per fortnight to go into each account. And then I'll pay with like cash or with my debit card from my current account, and then I move the money back.
Gotcha.
Because people say to me, so like last year, 9,500 people did my free online program. And loads of people said, oh, no, I'm not doing that. And then loads of people after said, can you just explain that again? And they were like, because I've got spreadsheets and pivot tables and graphs and charts, but the budget doesn't work. And I'm like, no, because in a spreadsheet, you can just pinch from Peter to pay Paul. And also, if you've just got everything in one current account, Parkinson's law, says whatever you've got, you'll use.
Mm-hmm.
So by putting it into the different accounts and then moving it, and people go, oh, that would take ages. And it's like, it takes me like 2 minutes to just divvy it up, and then I pay myself or the accounts back to each other at the end of the week. And that takes like 5 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. How did the banks appreciate the 11 accounts? Or?
So the HSBC phoned me and they're like, you need to come in for a chat. And I was like, okay. And they're like, you can't have all of these accounts. That one's only got like $20 in it. And I was like, yeah, but I've got that much saved. And I was like, and I was a little bit cheeky to the guy. I was like, if you've got more money saved than that amount and you can prove it to me, I'll get rid of all the accounts. But if you can't, I'm not. And then he said, oh, okay, you can keep them. So I was like, thanks. And they've never contacted me since.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with this system, I'm just feeling that, and I do a similar type of thing, but there's no guilt, right? Because you've it's all accounted for.
Yeah.
You have everything in its place. There's no, oh, should I or shouldn't I?
Yeah. So if you spend from the fun account on the first day, that's fine, because you just know that the fun account then is blank for the next 13 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what it was for. It was
exactly.
to be spent. So,
yeah.
And the way you're describing it, I'm almost getting this impression you don't automate it. Is that right?
No, I do it myself.
Okay. Is there any reason for that? To not have the money automatically go into the other accounts when it comes in?
Because when you do it yourself, you actually see what you're spending. So, and my mum and dad were both entrepreneurs, and so my mum ran like a fabric business, like a haberdashery shop and fabric and dry cleaning, and she ran her whole business in a purchase ledger book.
Okay.
My dad was a builder, and he ran his business on bits of scrap paper in an exercise book. My mum was really good at doing, like, those really big, long, old purchase with like about 50 columns long,
right, and about a metre wide.
Yeah. So she used those. She used to go off on a Sunday night and do it, and she understood that. I never quite worked out how it was so complicated, but they would write everything down. They had like a household book, which was for household expenses. So they always wrote stuff down. So I still keep a purchase ledger book as well. So anything I spend, like on my debit card, I write it down so I know exactly what's going in and out. Right. And quite often you have odd charges. So I trot into the HSBC with my little purchase ledger book, and I'm like, that I didn't make that. That's fraud. And they're like, yeah. And so, but there's often odd, and people have no idea. People have no idea what is going in and out of their account, or how much they've got at any given time. So that actual act of writing it down, pen and paper, and you can do it while you're watching telly. You go through your receipts and write it down. Yep. It makes it really easy when you're doing a tax at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. And it just really makes you, I guess, in your mindset or your subconscious of what's going in and out as well.
Yeah, you have to engage with it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the. In the end, I was, my thing that I was trying to do to help people with this didn't work. Basically, I was doing all the budgets and that, and I found people would do the budgets, but then they wouldn't stick to them. So what I ended up doing was I was trying to get people. I just want you to look once a week through your, if they spent everything electronically, I just want you to look once a week through that, and I want you to write down everything you've spent and where, and that's all I want you to do. No budgeting, no this. I just, that's step one. And the amount of people that I was working with that didn't, they wouldn't do that for some reason. I think they probably just didn't want to know. But the just the lack of engagement and the lack of context a lot of them had with what was getting spent on a weekly, fortnightly, monthly basis was astounding. really. Like, I mean, just no idea. Like, you know, they've got this much money for the year, this much money for the month. No idea where it goes, really.
So
it just goes.
So all the people I do a lot of research. I don't have a marketing budget. I just go on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and say I'm looking for people to interview, and you get loads of people reply. And I did a big survey of about 500 people in Brisbane. I didn't know any of them, and it was just a little survey monkey survey. And 82% didn't have no idea, like literally no idea. Something like 25% had no idea how much they owed either.
Okay.
Yeah, so people just don't know what they spend. 82% have absolutely no idea how much money they spend on a weekly, monthly, annual basis.
Okay.
Nothing, no idea at all.
Do you have any idea as to why why we don't do these? Because it seems so simple, really, right? You know, like it's just numbers. It's one of the few things, I think in life that is truly objective is how much money was spent, how much you had. You know, there's no grey area. It was spent or it wasn't. You know, so why don't we do these types of things? You know.
Because we've been taught how to spend money.
Okay.
We've not been taught how to not spend money.
Okay.
And I think so. I get asked this question a lot. You know, why am I so good at this? And but my mum and dad, as I said, were self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandparents were farmers. So my grandparents on the other side were farmers, and my granddad had a haulage company. So no one had ever in my family had a paycheck. And you see from a really early age, you know, the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, the boom and bust, you know, particularly in farming. You have a really bad, say, winter, or you can't make hay or whatever. You know, in the UK, we've had like foot and mouth and mad cow and all of those kind of things. So you really see that, you know, you need to have money saved. And so I guess that maybe financial volatility, if that's a word, because I wasn't going to say insecurity, because they had all saved money so that they did have money put aside, but not having a constant, you know, being paid every fortnight, and you see that all your life, then I think that probably prepares you more to have a value of financial security. Where I guess if you've grown up where mum and dad always get paid every fortnight, money's always coming in, you don't need to budget because you're always going to have a job, you're going to have this job for life, then your attitude from an early age is very different. And our attitude to money is formed when we're like 6 or 7 years old. So if all you've seen is spending on cards, it's okay to have anything and everything that you want, you don't need to save money, the money will always come from somewhere, then you think, oh, well, those exact things, I don't have to worry, just use the card, the money will always come, we'll always have a job, there'll always be money coming in. So people, and lots of people's, if your parents haven't got good financial skills, as in knowing, you know, to check the bank statements and things, then you're not going to have those either.
Okay. Very, very, very interesting. So
maybe we should be going into schools and teaching like 6-year-olds how to do a budget, and not when people are older.
Yeah. Okay, but you were saying too that a budget's, you know, not enough on its own. You know, it's the behavioural change as well that needs to happen. So what would you say is step one? Like, let's say someone's listening and they're like, okay, I do want to take a bit more control of my finances. I want to, you know, I'm worried about the redundancies. I'm worried about this and that.
But can we just go back to the other question? The previous comment. When I was little, well, me and my sister, and we'd save up our money for we go to Cornwall camping every summer for a week. And my mum used to say to us, this is your money you've got, maybe like 20 quid. So you can either divide it by every day, and you might have whatever it is, like £3, or find something that you really want to buy and then buy that on the last day. So my sister always laughs that I bought one of those like inflatable boats, you know, like the dinghy boat that you blow up.
Yeah.
And I bought it on the last afternoon of the holiday.
Okay.
So then there wasn't any time to use it. And she's like, you didn't really think that through. But, you know, that was how my mum had said, don't, because if you spend it all in the first day, you might see something better later on, which again is like the waiting list, the delayed purchases, and also the budgeting all in one. So that was a really good trick that I learned early on.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, and now we've got the other question.
Yeah. So first steps for people. So they as you said, 82% said they don't know what's going on. Where should they start?
So the first thing to do is identify the things they love doing and their priorities. The second is to do the budget and the banking. So sort out your budget, because everyone's got we can't all just spend $5,000 a month or whatever. Everyone's got bills to pay and things. And then the third one, which is also really important, is to get people in place to help. So when I was doing my no buying, that's just kind of like an accountability thing, really. When I was doing my no buying, when I did it in 2014, when I succeeded, I'd go onto Facebook at the end of every month and say, I finished month 4. This month I swapped, X for Y. I borrowed A, B, and C. And then I'd say, my goal is whatever for next month, and now to month 5. And there was a guy who's also a transport planner at Brisbane City Council, who I've met a couple of times at seminars. And he kind of became my real accountability buddy, because he'd be always like, it's the last day of the month, when are you going to do your update? And so I felt really accountable to him, because he really followed it. I didn't really know him from Adam, but do you know what I mean? He really was like, you're going to do this and I'm going to follow, and other people were asking. And it was really good, because it went from some kind of crazy hippie shit at the beginning in like the January and February through to like the end of the year, when everyone was like, wow, I want to hear, what are your lessons learned? What do you suggest other people do? And loads of people really following it. I did a talk at Super the other week, and a lady was telling me after that her and her sister do this weekly phone call. And one part of it is about how much money they saved, what they've spent. But when they want to buy something, they phone each other. So one of them might say, I've seen some shoes, and they discuss and debate and justify whether they should buy it or not. So really, it doesn't matter who your accountability buddy is, or whether it's someone you know, or a friend or family, or you're just doing it on Facebook. There's loads of people on Instagram now doing like budgets and saving, and they share their success every week. So even if it's to people you don't know, just having that accountability makes you succeed, because you've told people what you're going to do, and people don't like to go back on their word. And you're bringing all these people along for the journey, which is really interesting. Okay. And we can all do, most people have a Facebook account. They could be quite easy to update everyone on what's going on every week. So really interesting. All right, so we might just about need to wrap it up in a minute, but where's some places that people can find you, or find Underspent if they want to buy? So the Underspent book is in paperback in Dimmock's, QBD, Folio Books in Brisbane, most of the major bookshops. It's also in ebook and on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Book Depository. But I made the ebook $2.99. So I wanted it to be really affordable for everyone. Doing this has changed my life, and I'd like it to help other people. So I always say to people, the ebook is less than a coffee. Most people would buy a coffee a week. Some people buy a coffee a day. So it's actually cheaper to change your life than it is to drink a flat white.
Right.
So that was really important for me, to make sure that it really was affordable. And then I've also got it on my website as well. I sign the copies and send them out to people. And then I do a weekly blog. So that's on my Underspent Facebook page, on my own Facebook page, LinkedIn, Twitter, everywhere. So it's really important to share reflections, what I see, kind of the kind of proactive stuff and the reactive to what's happening in the media or the economy. I have a monthly challenge every month, which is free. So this month it's March Money Miracles. So it's all about starting a waiting list, because if you're not buying something instantly, like a book or a item of clothing, the miracle is that you're going to save more money in March. So there's a different challenge every month, and there's worksheets that are free to go with those. What else? And then I do various speaking and things as well. So
Okay.
yeah. Oh, and there's also the free 30 days of money saving tips on my website, and the 5-day Underspent challenge. So that's all on my website, cycling, as in riding a bike, cyclingrachelsmith.com.
Awesome. I am going to wrap it up in a sec, but now I do want to ask one more question here, because you're talking about this sharing, sharing your wins, sharing reflections, whatnot. Money's one of those things that, there can be a lot of shame, I suppose, around, not having money, or there's the people who kind of pretend they do have more than what they have, perhaps. Do you get any pushback with telling people to share, or seeing people share their decisions around money? Because and you were talking about the guy at your work who was, he obviously, it was someone who was really, I'm guessing they were projecting a bit. They weren't very happy with their own financial situation. Like this topic goes quite deep.
So money's a really taboo subject.
Yeah.
And people don't like talking about it. People who've got lots of money don't talk about money. People who don't have any money talk about money a lot. It's really contentious. Everyone's trying to keep up with the Joneses, but no one knows who the Joneses are. Everyone's, people are, I started a business yesterday and I'm already on 6 figures. And there's so much kind of hot air around. So I've taken a different stance, and I try not to be preachy, like, oh, I did this, you should do that. But I've really tied it into being debt-free and stress-free. And I've really tied it into being prepared for unexpected events. So I do a lot of community recovery. So after the cyclone last year, I'm in like Ellie Beach and Bowen and places. I'm just going up to Ingham this week after the flood. And I guess so I share, no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow. If you just don't buy that top that you think, or that dress that you think you might need now, and maybe save the money. But I really talk more about my experiences. So this is what worked for me. I'm not a financial planner. But this is what I've done. It's changed my life. Financial security. I don't need to be a millionaire or a billionaire. I work for the government. People can look up how much I earn on the internet. But it's just having a little bit of money, so that, if you break your leg and you need a month off work or whatever, or your car breaks down, or like I've got a rat in my roof, I had to get the rat man out. That's $200, but lots of people couldn't find $200.
Yeah.
And most people have probably got a rat in their roof. So, but it's all those kind of everyday things. But really working out what your values are and what's important for you. Cool. I think. With any behaviour change, people have to find the value, what's in it for them, basically. Mm-hmm. And if you share your successes and positive things, and you add value to people's lives, then people who are really anti this in the beginning, I've helped them remove their anxiety, that it's okay. You don't have to have, just because your neighbours have got the brand new Audi sat outside, you don't have to. I drive a 20-year-old Toyota Echo. I don't care. People are like, okay, you can go and ask your neighbours, we're having a barbecue, we don't have enough chairs, can we borrow yours? Because you've just got them in the garage and you're not using them. So just being a little bit willing, I guess, to do things differently.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially these days, that's a lot easier to do. I don't actually have a car myself.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't need one.
Yeah.
So why get one? And
and why get one just because everyone else has got one?
Yeah. And you actually crunching the numbers on it, it doesn't make sense for
No.
me, with
Yeah.
Uber around now and whatnot. It's, you factor in parking and all the costs that go along with that. I don't actually need one. So
Yeah.
it's incredible what you can find when you actually analyze some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So awesome, Rachel. Thanks for being with us today. That's cyclingrachelsmith.com for you guys to go and check out. But I really appreciate your time. That was an awesome discussion. Thanks for sharing all those stories with us.
It was great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Be The Push podcast. Show notes can be found at bethepush.com/podcast and clicking on the relevant episode link. I appreciate your company and look forward to talking to you again soon.